Acquitted or condemned. That's the name of this next devotional, and it's in Matthew 12, where Jesus has this long discourse with some religious guys and says this to them. I tell you that everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word they've spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. Empty words. What are those? And by our words we'll be acquitted or condemned? What does that mean? Let's look at what was happening before Jesus said this. These religious guys were looking for ways to trip Jesus by the actions of Jesus' followers. First of all, they found the disciples picking grain and eating on the Sabbath, which was not lawful. Jesus reprimands them for their condemning words on the innocent. Jesus is addressing the human need and how he is present now, but these guys are using words to condemn the innocent because they don't even understand the message of Jesus, freedom and provision from his hand. When we don't get the message and the mercy and the grace Jesus brings, we often speak words of condemnation when we judge the acts of those around us. Next, a man came up to Jesus with a shriveled hand, and these same guys quizzed Jesus and said, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" Jesus answers them with the words about the value of a person, how the value of a person is much more than a sheep, which any of them would pull out of a pit even on the Sabbath. So yes, it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. He offers them words of acquittal for the accused in the presence of the condemners. Not only did Jesus speak these words, he reached out and healed the man. They didn't stop. They brought him a demon-possessed man that Jesus set free, and these religious guys then dared to condemn Jesus himself, saying that he had powers of demons to cast out these demons. And they go on to say many accusing words against Jesus, and Jesus says that those who aren't with him are against him. And in verse 32, he says, anyone that speaks a word against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven. In verse 34, he calls them a brood of vipers and says, how can you that are evil say anything good? For what your heart is full of, that's what you speak. So these are evil men speaking words that are not good. Every word they had spoken had been words of condemnation toward the innocent, dismissal for the sick, and words of judgment against Jesus himself as they condemned his acts of mercy. Those words were a total affront against all that Jesus came to do, who he was, and toward those he came to save. They weren't concerned about people, but only about the laws governing the people. I read this in a commentary. We won't be judged by the number of church services we attended, or by the number of chapters of the Bible we read, or even by the number of hours we spent in prayer, but by the number of people we helped when their need came crying to us. To this, at the moment, the scribes and Pharisees had nothing to answer, for their argument had recoiled on their own head. And we can add to that, we won't find favor with God by the number of empty, condemning, or judgmental words that we speak against those God has created in his image, and especially not words against the work of Jesus and what he did on the cross. In this chapter, we see that in Jesus there is the quiet, strong serenity of one who seeks to conquer by love and not by the strife of words. Jesus was the great encourager, the restorer of health and hope and life to all men. It was evident by the words spoken by these religious leaders that they were totally missing the message of the gospel and refusing to be changed by it, to love their fellow man and love Jesus. They spoke words of condemnation to those that were hungry in need of healing. Their words brought no hope of restoration. They were empty words, and finally the presence of hope sat right in their midst, then their eyes were so blinded they could not sense the sin in their own hearts. I once heard a pastor say that if you're worried about whether or not you've blasphemed or spoken the unforgivable sin, you're probably okay because you're still tender. In essence, when we negate and refuse and speak against the work that Jesus did on the cross, and we're refusing Christ, and we know that refusing Christ results in death, we've caused it upon our own selves. Jesus ends the chapter speaking about the responsibility of words and how they reveal the character in our hearts. These guys then asked Jesus for a sign, and Jesus was sitting right before them, and they didn't see him but wanted him to perform for them. They were asking for a sign with their words, and Jesus was the gift of God in their presence. So back to words. Empty words need to be left unsaid because they offer no life. Looking for reasons to pick and condemn the innocent that are hungry and ill are words that offer condemnation and not life. And it's by these words, or may we say by the words we put into action, that we are either acquitted or condemned ourselves. These are hard words, but one of the most beautiful settings in the Bible. Jesus sitting among the accusers, defending those in need and offering them sustenance and healing without condemnation, demonstrating that in his presence is fullness of every kind, not empty words, because he's the word of life.